Everyone assumes the first UFO sighting happened in 1947 over Washington state. They're off by 386 years. On April 14, 1561, hundreds of residents of Nuremberg, Germany witnessed shapes they had never seen and couldn't name fighting in the sky above the rising sun for over 1 hour. A local artist documented the entire event in a broadsheet that still exists. Scientists say it was a weather phenomenon. Historians say it was religious propaganda. A psychologist named Carl Jung spent years analyzing it and concluded something far stranger than either explanation. And nobody, in 465 years, has managed to prove him wrong. To understand what happened that morning, you need to understand what Nuremberg was. Not the quiet tourist city of today, but one of the most powerful cities in the entire Holy Roman Empire. A city of 40,000 souls, guarded by 3 miles of fortified walls. A city where Martin Luther's Protestant Reformation had taken deep root. Where merchants argued theology on Tuesday mornings in the market square. Only 30% of men could read. Women, almost none. Information spread through broadsheets, single printed pages, illustrated with woodcuts, sold in the streets for pennies. Broadsheets were the newspapers, the breaking news alerts of 1561. And one broadsheet was about to carry a story that would outlast every newspaper ever printed. Tuesday, April 14th, 1561. Daybreak, the sun barely above the horizon. Witnesses begin looking up. At first, 2 blood-red semicircular arcs appear inside the body of the rising sun itself. Then, around the sun, above it and below and on both sides, a round ball described as partly dull, partly black, of a fairest color. Then the spheres arrive. Blood-red, dozens of them, some arranged 3 in a line, some 4 in a square, some alone, drifting with unnatural purpose across the face of the sun. Then come the crosses. Blood-red crosses, the same impossible color. Nobody is dreaming. Nobody is alone. Merchants stop mid-sentence. Children pull at their mothers' sleeves. Priests step out of churches and look up. The entire city is witnessing something it has no name for. Then the cylindrical rods appear. Long tubes emerging from the sun's corona, from which smaller spheres dart outward in every direction. 2 enormous crescents join the spectacle. Vast curved shapes unlike anything in the natural sky. And then what witnesses can only describe as a battle begins. The spheres attack one another. The crosses clash. The rods chase the globes. All of it moves with a terrifying sense of purpose. For over an hour this continues above a city of 40,000 people. And then, at the height of the chaos, something new arrives. A massive black shape, described as a spear or a triangular arrow, with its shaft pointing east and its tip pointing west. Hanging there, silent, patient, as if it has been waiting. After more than 1 hour of what witnesses can only describe as combat in the sky, the spectacle ends, but not quietly. The objects begin to fall, one by one. Then all at once, they descend from the sun toward the earth. They fall, the account says, as if they all burned. They waste away on the ground beyond the city walls with immense smoke. The great black spear crashes earthward last, trailing a column of thick black smoke that rises above the walls. Then the sky clears. The sun continues its ordinary arc across an ordinary morning. Nuremberg falls silent. Hundreds of witnesses, men, women, merchants, craftsmen, priests, look at each other. No one has an explanation. But one man decides to write it all down. Hans Glaser is a letter painter, a professional graphic artist and typesetter in Nuremberg's printing trade. Within weeks of April 14th, he produces a broadsheet, a single large printed page, 26.2 centimeters by 38.0 centimeters. On one half, a detailed woodcut illustration of the entire spectacle, the spheres, the crosses, the cylinders, the black spear, the city below. On the other half, his written account, a precise description of everything witnesses reported that morning. He names the date. He names the city. He describes the shapes with a specificity that reads almost like a police report. That broadsheet is printed and distributed across Nuremberg, and then it travels. It ends up, eventually, in the collection of the Zentralbibliothek Zürich in Switzerland, where it sits today, 465 years later. Read Glaser's account all the way to the end, and something shifts. After the precise physical description of what was seen, the tone changes completely. Glaser does not conclude with curiosity. He does not call for investigation. He ends with a command: repent. The entire spectacle, he writes, is a warning from our merciful Father in heaven. Nuremberg's citizens are sinners. God is angry. The blood-red battle in the sky is his message. He signs it, by Hans Glaser, letter painter of Nuremberg. Glaser is not reporting a mystery. He is preaching a sermon. And that changes everything about how we should read his account. Because once you see the theology embedded in the eyewitness testimony, you start to ask a harder question. How much of this is actually a report, and how much is a script? Historians who study the Broadsheet carefully find something Glaser never mentions. The image itself is wrong. Nuremberg had one defining landmark visible from virtually anywhere in the city: the Kaiserberg, the Imperial castle, perched on its rocky outcrop above every rooftop. Glaser's woodcut doesn't include it. Not a mistake any artist living in Nuremberg would make. There's something else. The Church of St. Lorenz, shown prominently in the woodcut skyline, had already burned down. Glaser drew a building that no longer existed and omitted the one that dominated the actual skyline. The woodcut is not a faithful visual record. It is a symbolic composition designed to communicate rather than document. Which raises the question, how much of the text is doing the same thing? So what actually happened over Nuremberg? Atmospheric scientists have a confident answer: parhelia, sundogs. A natural phenomenon produced when sunlight refracts through flat hexagonal ice crystals suspended in high-altitude cirrus clouds. The result: bright spots and luminous arcs appear around the sun, sometimes blood-red at sunrise, sometimes multiplied into full halos and rings. Sundogs had been observed and documented since antiquity. Greek philosophers wrote about them. Medieval scholars cataloged them. They look dramatic. They look supernatural to an untrained eye. And in the right conditions, they can fill a significant portion of the sky with colored geometric shapes. Case closed, right? Not quite. Because sundogs had been painted by European artists before 1561, and those paintings look nothing like Glaser's woodcut. 26 years before Nuremberg, in 1535, a sundog appeared over Stockholm, Sweden. A court painter documented it in what became known as the Vädersolstavlan, the sundog painting. That painting survives today. Study it and you see immediately what atmospheric scientists see. Precise halos, geometrically accurate arcs, bright points of light positioned exactly where optical physics dictates. Strange and dramatic, yes, but clearly a natural phenomenon, faithfully rendered. Now look at Glaser's woodcut. Fighting spheres. A black spear. Cylinders ejecting smaller globes. Crosses moving with apparent purpose. These are not the same thing. An artist who saw sundogs would not draw what Glaser drew. Either Glaser witnessed something genuinely different, or he never witnessed anything at all, and built his entire account from something other than the sky. Jacques Vallée is one of the most respected researchers of unidentified aerial phenomena in the world, a computer scientist and astronomer who worked with NASA and inspired the character of the French scientist in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Vallée looked at the Nuremberg Broadsheet and concluded it was not a factual eyewitness account. His evidence, across the German-speaking world throughout the 16th century, dozens of nearly identical broadsheets were produced, all following the same formula. A terrifying celestial spectacle. A woodcut illustration. A religious warning to repent. Vallée called them stock myths, possibly commissioned by church authorities to frighten populations into compliance during the turbulent early decades of the Protestant Reformation. Historians Ulrich Magin and Wiebe Schwartz reached the same conclusion. These were the tabloid journalism of their era. But then something happens that derails this entire theory. August 7, 1566. Basel, Switzerland. Citizens wake before sunrise to a spectacle that mirrors Nuremberg with uncanny precision. Black spheres appear in the sky before dawn, moving in formation. Many turn blood red. They appear to collide with each other in aerial combat. A broadsheet is produced. A woodcut is illustrated. A religious warning is issued. Basel and Nuremberg are separated by 170 miles. There was no telegraph, no telephone, no mechanism to rapidly propagate a detailed story across that distance in 5 years. The witnesses in Basel could not have known the precise details of what Nuremberg reported in April 1561, and yet they described the same objects, the same sequence, the same battle, the same fall, the same shapes, 5 years apart, 170 miles apart. The stock myth theory just became much harder to defend. Basel and Nuremberg are not alone. The celestial phenomenon over Stralsund, Germany, in 1665, documented and illustrated with a woodcut. And then, on October 13, 1917, at Fatima, Portugal, something is witnessed by an estimated 70,000 people simultaneously. The miracle of the sun, where tens of thousands watch the sun change colors, spin, and appear to hurtle toward Earth before returning to its place. Some witnesses report waves of heat and colored light radiating outward. The Catholic Church declares it a miracle. Scientists call it mass hysteria. Carl Jung looks at all of it, Nuremberg, Basel, Stralsund, Fatima, and publishes his analysis in 1958. His title alone should give you pause: Flying Saucers, a modern myth of things seen in the skies. His conclusion is more unsettling than any of the other theories. Before Jung, one more theory, one almost nobody mentions. Vannoccio Biringuccio was an Italian metallurgist who in 1540 published De la Pyrotechnia, Europe's first comprehensive book on metallurgy, which included detailed chapters on rockets and explosive devices used in both military engagements and public festivals. By 1561, copies had circulated throughout the Holy Roman Empire. The theory: someone in Nuremberg, having studied Biringuccio's rocket recipes, staged an experimental fireworks display at dawn. Burning rockets could produce moving spheres. Colored smoke could explain the blood-red hues. The hour-long duration matches a stage spectacle. It's clever, but it collapses on one question. How do you explain Basel? No shared pyrotechnician. No recorded festival. The same spectacle 170 miles away, 5 years later. No fireworks theory survives Basel. Carl Jung was not a credulous man. He was one of the 20th century's most rigorous thinkers, a psychiatrist who had spent 50 years mapping the architecture of the human unconscious. When he published Flying Saucers, a modern myth of things seen in the skies in 1958, he was 83 years old and had nothing to prove. His argument was precise. Something real happened over Nuremberg on April 14, 1561, most likely a genuine atmospheric phenomenon. But the human mind does not observe neutrally. It interprets, and it interprets through the symbolic vocabulary of its era. In 1561, that vocabulary was angels, demons, divine judgment, holy war. The spheres became soldiers. The black spear became God's final warning. The same phenomenon appearing today, Jung argued, would be described in the language of our era as spacecraft, as extraterrestrials, as invasion. The event doesn't change. Only the story we tell about it does. The Nuremberg Broadsheet sits today in the Zentralbibliothek Zürich, 26.2 centimeters by 38.0 centimeters, printed sometime in April 1561, for 165 years old. Hans Glaser signed it. Ilse von Jacobi translated it into English. Coleman S. von Keviksky published a UFO analysis of it in Official UFO magazine in January 1976. Carl Jung analyzed it in a book that became a classic of 20th century psychology. Atmospheric scientists have written journal papers about it. Reformation-era media historians have cited it as a case study in religious propaganda. No single academic discipline owns it. No single explanation has survived all scrutiny. The Broadsheet sits in its archival folder in Zurich, studied by researchers who arrive with different questions and leave with different answers. It is a document that refuses to be filed away. Whatever appeared over Nuremberg on April 14, 1561, the most remarkable thing about it is not what was seen. It's what happened next. Hundreds of people looked at something they could not explain, and they did not fall silent. They talked. They argued. They commissioned an artist. They printed a record and distributed it. They connected the unexplained to the biggest questions they knew: God, meaning, punishment, salvation. That impulse, to witness something strange in the sky, to demand it means something, to refuse to let it be nothing, is not a 16th century impulse. Every generation finds something in the sky it cannot explain. Every generation builds a story around it in the vocabulary of its time. The sky has always been where we put our deepest uncertainties, and it is still up there, waiting. History is full of events like April 14th, 1561, documented, debated, and still unresolved. At History's Hidden Chapters, that's all we do. Find the stories that fell through the cracks of official history and hold them up to the light. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And drop your theory in the comments. Sundog, propaganda, fireworks, or something no one has thought of yet. What do you think Nuremberg saw?